When in 1871, the Great Fire, one of the worst urban disasters in history, hit Chicago, burning the city consisting of mostly low wooden buildings to the ground. Out of the ashes grew numerous opportunities for architects and opened the door for young architects such as George Allen Fuller, Louis Sullivan, Denmark Adler, Daniel Burnham, and John Rue, as some of the men assigned the task of the rebuilding of the city. However, with the city now reduced to having no past, the convergence of catastrophe, capitalism, and new architectural styles led to a possibility of reinvention. Daniel H. Burnham was one of the earliest modern city planners and the architect of the first American skyscrapers. Known to other acclaimed architects such as Frank Lloyd Wright for being a great man with big ideas rather than a creative architect. He created a practice of architecture that has gone from being an art and a craft to being a business. Criticized often by his rival Louis Sullivan, who accused his designs of being feudal and imperial, lacking of original expression and dependence upon classicism. In his autobiography of an idea, he stated that Burnham was a colossal merchandiser whose megalomania concerning the largest and the tallest, the most costly and sensational, moved on its sheer orbit as he painfully learned to use the jargon of big business. To which Burnham responded, "Architecture is a work up to a business. Handle big things and deal with big businessmen." Critics described skyscrapers as buildings that reached up to the sky like cathedrals, that served as an enabling machine whose sole function was to lend to profit the same men whose money invested and erected them, making the rich men richer. Greed and profit was a principal motivation behind these structures, and the private initiative superseded that of the common good. Investors will continue to erect buildings from which they can reap the greatest possible revenue with the least possible outlay. For businesses that rented office space, skyscrapers were more practical than smaller buildings. Working in an office provided workers with light and ventilation, and permitted the concentration of business in so small a space that it became an easy way to handle transactions between many different personnel and many different businesses in one day. The fear of aesthetics and the fear of pushing buildings to far beyond its structural limits, due to the infancy in steel construction, created a push for implementing building codes that would restrict heights. While Chicago was implementing its building codes, New York, with its lagging behind in skyscraper design, finally inserted the word skeleton construction into the building code. When Fuller heard about New York's finally updated building regulations, he decided to open a Fuller office in New York and took the opportunity to spread Chicago's influence. The Fuller Company, in collaboration with Daniel Burnham, eventually embarked on a plan to design New York City's first skyscraper, known as the Flatiron Building, formerly known as the Fuller Building. New York City's first skyscrapers stood as the tallest building in New York City upon completion in 1902. At 285 feet, the steel-framed high-rise building, covered with non-load-bearing masonry, served as a landmark, stretching 19th century construction technology to its limits. The site for this building is a triangular shape due to the main roots already being set in place at the time of construction. The building was referred to as Barnum's Folly. Due to the extreme height, people did not think the building would withstand high winds, and many bet on how long the building would stand in the environment. Employing a Renaissance design aesthetics with Baroque art style antiquity, base, shaft, and capital to appeal to big business interests. This steel-framed terracotta and stone-clad skyscraper acted as an attempt to create a new business center north of Wall Street and rent out offices to various commercial and financial enterprises. As more skyscrapers were built, people criticized and questioned to whether a skyscraper can be beautiful. Debates were raging over the problem of the skyscraper. In Sullivan's The Tall Office Building Artistically Considered, he answers that, "In the pervading law of all things, that form follows function. This is the law. Shall we then daily violate this law in our art? The shape, form, outward expression, design, or whatever we may choose, of the tall office building should in the very nature of things follow the functions of the building." The function of the skyscraper was economic profit, both for its builders and companies who leased space. Its form, above all, Sullivan argued, must be lofty. Every inch a proud and soaring thing, rising in sheer exaltation from bottom to top, it is a unit without a single dissenting line. The man who designs in this spirit must realize that the problem of the tall office building is one of the most stupendous, one of the most magnificent opportunities that the Lord of Nature in His beneficence has ever offered to the proud spirit of man. Ironically, Sullivan died broke, but never let go of his idealistic principles. Although both Sullivan and Burnham were stars of the 19th century, they created radical different structures and often criticized each other. Both embraced the use of iron and steel framing, and won commissions throughout the country. But where Sullivan was known for ideas of emotional architecture, creating buildings in a way that people who know nothing of architecture would have an emotional reaction to them, and in doing so, many times refused to honor clients' wishes and created work that was always an original expression. Burnham, on the other hand, designed for the sheer dynamic character of big ideas that led to big achievements. Burnham, more of an artist of business, whom capitalists felt they could identify with, and he dealt with the businessman in business terms. He studied his clients' needs and desires, and those desires would weigh heavily on his design. In his work, he attempted to reconcile the practical and the idea. Business is capitalism and democracy. Where for Sullivan, form follows function, for Burnham, form follows finance. In a common quote, "Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood, and probably will not themselves be realized. Make big plans, aim high and hope and work, remembering that a noble, logical diagram, once recorded, will not die, but long after we are going to be a living thing, asserting itself with ever-growing insistence."